Todd, are you there?
I am.
Deborah?
Here.
Christy? No Christy yet? Oh, Christy, there she is.
There,
Lisa.
I know I'm muted. Okay.
Here.
Lisa.
I'm here.
Hi, Nancy Turner.
Here.
Margaret.
Here.
Recording
Nancy
in progress.
Eichstead.
Whoa, Nancy's here.
Okay. Natalie.
Present.
What is happening, people? Libby. You see Libby? Ouch.
If everyone can mute themselves, I'll try and troubleshoot some things and see if we can sort that out.
Okay.
But everybody except for Lorene mute themselves.
All right, so you're gonna have to wave at me. I don't see Libby. Okay, how about Beverly? There she is. Lanny, I know you're there. And Leslie's there, and I think I saw May. Hi, Leslie. And where is May? There she is. Okay, it looks like the only one we're missing is Libby, unless she came late. Nope, I don't see that. Okay, well, welcome. It's been a long time since we've all been together as a group, since May 5th. Can you believe it? And welcome to our new project manager, Jason. Yay. Nice to have you on board. So today, our agenda, we really have two big things to talk about. One, Jason is going to update us on how the project is going and also about our schedule. And then we get to hear from Opsis on the schematic design, how that's going. Of course, you guys are going to have an opportunity for some questions and we'll get some answers. And I believe that Allison, you're going to be coordinating the question and answer. Do you want to talk a little bit, or did you already talk about how you're going to do that?
We can talk about that when we get there.
Okay.
But I'll just ask folks, if you are using the chat, if you can change it to everyone on the settings, so folks who are listening can follow along if you do put anything in the chat. But yeah, I'll run that through when we get there. Thanks, Lorene.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so that's all I have at this moment. I guess I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Yeah, so once again, I'm glad to finally meet everybody here. It's been a long time. I know I've seen a few of you in a prior meeting back in June, but I'm excited to finally help you guys figure out what we've been up to the last few months since the last meeting. So with me today, you'd already met Allison. We've got Jim with Opsis and Sina Meyer with Opsis, who will help kind of go through our updated design. So with that, Lauren, did you want to go or get the meeting minutes?
Yes, approved.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody had a chance to see the meeting summary from the May 5th summary that was attached. And we have, that was our last meeting. It was pretty big. So like to see with a show of hands, if we had any approval on that, or do we have any discussion, first of all? Kind of looking at everybody. It's hard on two screens. So no one seems to be raising their hand. So would it, are we in agreement by hands up if you are approving those minutes? Let me see, I see 1, 2, 3. Natalie's at your hand, 4. Margaret, I can't see your hand. Is it approval? Yes, and Beverly, 4, 5 there. Looks like, let me turn to the next screen. And it looks like we have everybody. Todd, is that a yes for you? Yep. Okay. All right. Looks like 100% approval. And with that, we're going to go back over to Jason for some project updates and schedule.
All right. Can we, I don't know if Sina or Allison's got the slideshow.
Yeah, I can go ahead and share my screen if I have the authority to. Let me try.
Excuse me a second. This is Nancy. I apologize for interrupting. I'd like to welcome Jason, and maybe he could tell us a little bit about himself, since none of us have ever had that opportunity to visit with him.
That's a good point. Probably should. Name's Jason Varga. I've started in late May on this project, and really excited to be part of it. I think it's a really cool project, and really looking forward to trying to help this move along. My background before this I've worked for general contractors for the last 20 plus years in that world. So it's kind of nice to be on the other side of the table and, try to help these projects move along. And hopefully we can build something everybody's going to really like and enjoy for a long time coming. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So Jason, does this mean that you know how to slap around contractors if they?
I do. We don't want to necessarily do that if we don't have to, but
Okay, but you can be the hammer.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So what I'll do over these next few slides, I'll give you a little project update here, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit more on the cost issues we have, and then also the schedule issues we have. So just so here, like we said before, everybody probably understands schematic design drawings have been completed, and the corresponding estimate has been completed for those drawings. The Cmgc Rfps have been reviewed and the shortlist is decided. So the Cmgc, in case some of you are wondering what that is, that just stands for Construction Manager / General Contractor. What this process that we're doing for this project, and also the Oak Lodge, because these are all tied together right now as we go through this process. What that means is we're bringing on a general contractor early in the design phase, and the way to think about it is we're just partnering. We're partnering with the general contractor, the designer, and the owner, and the idea is we all bring our strengths and bring ideas and work together so that once design is complete, everybody's on board and ready to go, and everybody understands the challenges and the issues, and hopefully we've worked through all that. And also it just helps with that general contractor can help with details that maybe need to be tweaked that work better from their experience. They might have ideas on different materials or ways to build things. They're also going to have probably better, I shouldn't say better, they might have different information on costs and whatnot with people that they work with on a daily basis. So it's just a way for us to progress with design and really try to weed out all the surprises and not go through the whole process and at the end realize that, hey, we're $2 million over budget, or this won't work. I need a change order owner to do this. So the idea is we work all this out early on in the process. And then by the time design's done, we've got a pretty solid design and GMP ready to go. So with that, we did end up getting 7 proposals. And just this afternoon, we've shortlisted down to the top 3, and we will be interviewing them next week. This particular item is like what I would call critical path. Like it's kind of what's driving the schedule right now. So we're trying to, do our due diligence, but move this through as quickly as we can to get somebody on board to help us out. So. And then the next item we've recommended right now to stop work on design until we get a Cmgc estimate and that we've reconciled it with the estimate we have. Because what's happened right now is we've worked with a third-party estimator to get that's who we've been working with this whole project. And we feel the responsible thing and the prudent thing to do is to get another estimate from the CMGC. One, to see if it lines up with what we already have, or they might have some ideas or ways to show that we're not as far over budget as we think. So as a group, we've decided that that's the prudent thing to do. And then the last item I wanted to bring up on the update, and I don't know if there's confusion over this, but we have secured 500,000 in state funding from your representative Meek for the Gladstone Library. That is separate from Oak Lodge has also secured 750K for that project. We are expecting those funds to be released sometime in October, so it'll be in plenty of time for the project to use. I don't have really any other details as far as if there's any particular scope or anything that it has to be used for. So we are in contact with them and we'll figure that out. But that was good news. And I just wanted to make it clear that 500K is for the Gladstone Library. All right, next slide. So in my email from a while ago, I mentioned that our estimate came in about 1.4 million higher than our master plan budget. So those increases were due mostly from the pandemic and just material cost, equipment cost is really volatile right now. And it's really hard to, everything's just jumped up in price right now. And until things settle down, that's just something we're going to have to deal with. And then, some of the other issues are, you're in the master plan, you're starting from, a rendering, it doesn't have a lot of detail. And when you kind of add that detail, you're starting to decide on, the quality of finishes and whatnot. So some of that happens. And then, some scope, we just miscalculated how much of it there was. So that was the big reason for the jump. And so part of the process is we got to figure out how to get back to the original budget. So the process we use, you'll probably hear me say VE, which just stands for value engineering. The idea of value engineering is like say you have a structural column, right? The original design for this was CLT, which is cross-laminated timber. You could do it out of CLT, you could do it out of steel, you can make it out of concrete. So the VE process is to say, this is what I have. Is there, a more cost-effective way to basically get the same end result? So that's what we've gone through with OPSIS and the third-party estimator to try to get back close to the original budget we had. So we came up with the log that contains about 30 items, and those items add up to about 1.3 million. So that brings us really close to back to where we were. I want to bring up 4 of these items are pretty significant changes to the design. It might not necessarily be aesthetically significant, but it's for design purposes, it's pretty significant changes. So these 4 out of at 1.3, these 4 account for about 750,000 of that. And before we move on to the next design phase, we would need to make a decision on these 4 because it is a substantial amount of work to go to these for the designer. So the first one is the structure. So the original structure was CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, basically an engineered wood product. And we're looking at changing all of that to structural steel and steel decking. Massing is basically reducing the height of the rooms at the community room and offices. And when we get to offices part, we can show you what that looks like. The sunscreen, we are looking at reducing the amount of the screen that we had from the original. And then mechanical, a big change is for energy efficiency, we had radiant floor heating, which is basically just water tubing in the concrete, and it's a more energy efficient way of heating the space. So we're looking at getting rid of that and just replacing it with VRF, which is a variable refrigerant flow. And what variable refrigerant flow, the easy way to think about is if you have like a ductless heating and cooling unit in your house, it's just basically a commercial version of that. It just uses refrigerant to heat and cool the building. So it's still very efficient, just not quite as efficient as the radiant floor. But it provides a substantial savings. So there's those 4, and then there's still 26 remaining items. What we would do in this case is we would take most of those remaining items and say, we're going to plan on the lower cost option for these remaining items for most of them. Some of them we're not, unless we absolutely have to. And what we would do during the design and estimating process is if our budget comes back to where we have some money left, or our budget's coming in lower than we need it to, we would buy back certain items as we progress in design. So it's just a list that we'll, as we progress to construction documents, if we can feel pretty good about buying back and using that money to buy back some of these options, we will. The reason we can do that, they're not, as far as design goes, they don't cause, it's pretty easy to change them out. So yeah, Deborah.
Could you go over massing again?
Yeah, so it might be easier to see it when you see it, but basically think about it, if you have like that community room in that one corner of the building, the roof level, the very top of the ceiling that you wouldn't see, but it goes up to the roof level. Basically what we're doing is we're taking that and we're dropping it, I can't remember how many feet, but probably like 5 feet or so. 5-6 feet, I can't remember, but Sina and them can tell you when we get to that point. But what it does, it just reduces the overall volume of the building, is what we're trying to do. So it uses less material. If we don't have to go up as high, you got less siding to use, and just less structure to go up to it. So it's a way to not change dramatically the look of the building and to save on material cost for it. And it's a place we felt we could drop it and it would look, it wouldn't look weird or different. So does that make sense?
Well, so this is basically how the exterior is going to look, not the volume of the room itself.
No, not the floor.
Yeah, the room itself, I don't think the ceiling that's in there would drop. I don't know if it would drop at all or it wouldn't drop hardly at all. So the room itself to you probably would feel pretty similar.
Yeah, I can answer that, Jason.
Yeah.
The main reading room, that height does not change. So it's really, but what does change is the height in the meeting room that's in the southeast corner, and some of the volume above restrooms and administrative areas. So no impact to the public space, at least the main reading room height.
Okay.
Jim,
Yeah.
some of us toured the library over in Vancouver,
Okay. Right.
and I remember that the office areas and the work area was,
Right.
the ceilings were so low and it was like claustrophobic.
Yeah,
And I don't think in as small as our library is going to be, anything that ended up feeling that way would be terrible.
yeah. No, that won't be the case. We're maintaining the height that we've been showing, the clear height that we're showing in the teen area and the children's area. Sina, what is that clear height right now? Can you remind me?
It's
I don't wanna-
11 feet. So we have
11
11
feet
feet
clear.
to children's and teens.
Yeah, so 11
But-
feet that's pretty high.
Yeah, but the area I was talking about was where the office areas and where they worked, the work area was really
Nope.
bad. And
Yeah.
also if the meeting room area, if the ceiling is lower, that will cause it to be noisy when you have meetings in there.
Right. So we're looking at maintaining the 11 feet clear in the meeting room as well as the administrative offices. So it'll,
Okay,
within inches, it's close to that. And
okay,
we have strategies for how to, supply air to it so we can maximize the volume without dropping the ceiling down. And we're going to want some acoustical treatment in those spaces anyway on the ceiling. But 11 feet is really a pretty generous height.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
I see
Thank
Christy's
you.
hand, but I just want to check, Jason, had you gone through kind of all the information you wanted to go
I
through?
got one more slide. If I can get through that, then we can do a Q&A on what
Cool.
I've.
Then let's hold questions for just a second.
All right, so this is the news, not the greatest news, but what I'm showing here is obviously I said we put the project on hold for design because we need to get back in budget. So what that looks like right now is we are estimating it's going to be about a 4-month push on the overall schedule of the library. We're hoping that by mid-November that we can get going again. But it really depends on how quickly we can get our CMGC estimate done, reconciled, and have staff and everybody look through it and make our recommendations on how to move forward. So that is so that just, as you can see, it pushes everything to where we're starting construction. If it goes with the 4 months, we're looking at starting construction in the summer. Right now is what it looks like. So and then it would finish in the summer of 2023. So with that, does anybody have any questions they would like to ask?
I do.
Yeah.
Let's go to Christy and then if you can put your hands up, folks, I can get a running list so we can make sure we hear from everyone.
Okay.
So just a couple of things. The steel as opposed to the CLT, that's more aesthetic.
Yeah, and you'll see
Okay.
with what we're gonna do after this is OPSIS has got some drawings that will show you what that difference looks like, and we'll show you kind of what we had previously, and then they'll go through and show you what the new with steel would look like, so you can see what that looks like. But yeah, that'll have that's a pretty substantial aesthetic, because you had CLT columns, you had the roof panels that would have been exposed in some areas. So, but we think there's ways to still get that look with the wood. They'll make it feel warm, that it won't look just like an ugly steel and steel deck building. So there's ways to mitigate having to see that.
So then my other question was, I was part of the investigative team talking with the Energy Trust for helping with possibly grants and monies and things like that. So have we reached out and gotten a feel for maybe getting some help to maybe keep the radiant floors or other energy things that might be cut?
I'd have to look and see what's possible, because I'm sure we could. I just don't know if what they would provide for grants would be enough to cover the cost
Okay.
difference in that. What I can tell you is we still meet, even if we eliminate the radiant floor heating, we still meet the I think it's the 2030 challenge. We're
Mhm.
still underneath
Okay.
our goal. So
I mean,
do
I know
feel
we were hoping for net zero if
Yeah.
possible, but
Yeah, we did an analysis on that. The VRF system is highly efficient, not quite as efficient as a radiant slab. And so to get to net zero, obviously we're going to need photovoltaic array on the roof. And by going to the VRF system, we did this analysis because it's a good question. You would need to add 7 additional PV panels, which isn't significant. But by adding those 7 additional panels to what you would already need to have with the radiant slab, you can get to net zero.
and is that possible?
Yes, we need to do a more updated layout on the roof. So we haven't done that yet, but we have that analysis and we would need to test that. So, and
All
we
right.
can do that fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Nancy, go ahead.
Good question, Christy. Hey, this is for Jason. I'm not really clear on what happens after you've got the estimate from your third-party estimator and then the general contractor comes
Yeah.
in. It seems like there's still going to be some disagreement over costs when that happens. What do we do then?
So that's where, I come in and our team comes in, and we gotta, as a collective group, come to a decision on what we have to do. So what I don't want to do is the one estimate we have, I don't want to move forward with all these changes, because if the CMGC comes in a little bit under what the third party, we may be able to not have to VE out certain scopes, or if that makes sense. That the idea is if we can save some scope and not have to take it out, then we would. It's a kind of a second opinion, and yeah, you're right. There may be a difference between the both. And then as a group, we have to sit and go through that in detail and figure out why they think differently than, like, why the CMGC might have a different number or opinion than third-party estimator. And as a group, we'll just come to a decision on what we think we need to carry forward for that. So it's definitely, we don't expect them to agree necessarily. So there is always a back and forth, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. It sounds like some form of this process is going to happen again at that point.
Yeah, the idea would be we go through this and then we make our recommendations. If we, like, say these 4 major changes that we say, yep, we have to do these, we move forward with that, and then we're off to the races on the next phase of design. So we're just we'll do our best to move through that as quickly as we can. But
so I realize it's a moving target, and the longer it takes, the more the costs go up at the same time, because when we started this, we didn't have the pandemic, we didn't have all the crazy construction inflation. So I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, we are too. Yeah, the longer you push it, escalation of prices can go up. Who knows? It may go down after, if things ever settle down, but we don't want to bank on that, obviously. So yeah, we're aware of that, and we'll do our best to shorten this up. it's just a process you got to go through, unfortunately. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
Thank you.
Other questions from folks?
I do.
Go ahead, Margaret.
I have a question about the heating and the long-term cost. Is if they change the heating, is the cost down a few years down the road? Is that going to be a lot more expensive than what was originally planned? Or is the cost going to be about the same?
I'd like to tell you I know the answer right now. I don't think it'd be significant. I'd have to kind of go back to our design team and see if there's a significant, like, over the life of the system, if there's a significant cost to maintain that and the amount of energy. I would guess it's not too much. But yeah, I can look into that and see if I can get back to you.
We can provide more detail on it. The VRF system is a very efficient mechanical system.
Yeah.
One of the other side benefits, and you'll start to see this when we show you the interiors, but with the radiant system, you want to expose as much of the concrete slab and floor as possible. That is your kind of energy source. So it limits where you can put carpet. And so I think it could be viewed as a positive is with the VRF, you're still supplying the floor registers, but you actually have more opportunity to have larger areas of carpet, which provides some warmth. It also provides acoustical enhancement. And it means that you don't, ideally with the concrete floor, you want to polish the floor and grind it down to get kind of a more terrazzo look to it a little bit, if you can. When you put the carpet over a more rock concrete floor, it's actually a less expensive system as well. So there's a lot of trade-offs, of pluses and minuses. So.
And something I'll add to that. So just so you know what the number is. So it's about 80,000, I think, that we've estimated right now, the cost to go with the VRF versus the Radiant. So you can take that into account too, that I don't think it would ever be that much more. And also the VRF is above ground in the ceiling. And, if you had to do any repairs or maintain it, it's much obviously easier to get to than to have to do any work in the slab. It'd be pretty difficult too. So.
Okay, am I on?
Yep.
Hi, so that brings us to our next section, which is going to be OPSIS and talking to us about that schematic design, the review and the changes that are suggested.
Okay, well, I'm going to go through the plan as well as the exterior, and then Sina's going to walk us through the interior spaces. So this is the plan. It should look very familiar to you. It's a plan that we had shared previously, and we didn't really touch any of the spaces. So in terms of cost saving strategies, there was no change to the rooms and the size of spaces. So the floor plan stayed intact. The one area that you'll start to see some minor adjustments on is, for instance, at the courtyard. That's the kind of updated plan, but it's already a little bit out of date, because one of the cost saving strategies and even code requirements was to create these extended 10-foot walls that run in the north-south direction that Sina is pointing to. And so you'll see the geometry of the pathway that everyone liked kind of goes right into the wall there. So the next step as we go into more detailed design will be to keep the character of the courtyard as we've all as you've directed us on, but some of the geometry alignments will need to adjust a bit. So the south half of that east end of the courtyards where windows are, and that's something that, you know, has been adjusted a little bit. The other thing that we started to look at the end of schematic design was the kind of placemaking in the children's area, and really kind of focusing on that northeast corner as kind of a zone that could be defined as a story time space, and something that has a really nice connection out to the courtyard. So you'll start to see how that might be developed when we get to some of the interior views. But those are really the only changes. So this is where we left it at the end of schematic design. It shows you the extent of the sunscreen element, which was wrapping around the upper zone of the building, as well as coming down to the ground in places. So it was kind of becoming a trellis element for landscape, also kind of a lower level privacy screen. The mechanical rooftop well was actually kind of a depression in the roof, and that's where the mechanical equipment was located. And so the big change here was to kind of reduce the height over the community space meeting room, and then also over the administrative area. So the lower roof that was over the children's area just wraps around the south side of the building. It's a L shape. And then the high volume that was for the reading room just stayed the same. We kept the high volume to announce the entry and covered porch. So the building really announces itself at that intersection. We know that's very important. In some ways, that volume feels even taller because of the adjacent walls being lower. Some ways we think it's actually announces itself at the intersection more, which has always been kind of a comment that's been brought up. The other thing it does is obviously we've limited now the amount of the screening element. It's really just associated with the entry porch and filtering west light coming into the reading room. So it's it's probably half of the area that we had previously. And instead of bringing it down to the ground as a trellis, we're just allowing it to sit up high and to really just focus on performing as a sunscreen. And with this, we're starting to reconsider what the materiality of that sunscreen material is. And we'll show you some other views that share what that might be. So this is a view from the south of where we were previously, and you can see the what was the Kebony material. And we had actually worked on how to create more of a woven layered pattern that might feel more organic. But we've kind of jettisoned that idea. And the next view shows what happens with the current design. So this shows you how the sunscreen element is kind of relegated to really focusing on the entry to the building. And then you can also see in this view the lower height massing over the administrative office, as well as the meeting room and the restroom zone. And then there's a lighter gray volume kind of set back from the more solid material. That's a screen wall that goes around the mechanical equipment that's up on the roof. To create a screen wall around the mechanical is a lot less money than creating a depressed well within the volume. So it's a more cost-effective approach. The other thing I'll kind of mention, and we'll show you in a little more detail, but another cost-saving strategy is instead of the Oco skin panel on the solid kind of darker gray volume, and just so you, as a reminder, the Skin, it's a brand name. It's a type of cement board that has an integral color. You can have a variety of tones and values to it. It almost takes on a stone-like quality about it. But it's also, it comes with a certain price tag. It's also a material that, being down at the pedestrian level, is more vulnerable to potentially vandalism. We've actually heard that even the current city hall has unfortunately been tagged at times. And so what we're looking at here is a painted cement board panel that would be of varying dimensions and width, very similar dimensionally that we were looking at for the Skin, but it's a painted surface. And with that comes the advantage that if there is vandalism on it, it's easy to maintain. So you aren't dependent on a vandal resistant coating that you have to recoat. So it's a much more practical material in some ways. And it also is much more cost effective. So that's a strategy that we're looking at. I mean, we can go through this and come to questions on the exterior, or take questions now. Maybe I'll just continue on the exterior. Is that okay, Lisa and Christy? Okay, all right, I'll just keep going. So this is where we were on the exterior. It shows you the higher wall next to the vestibule that goes up the full height of the reading room, up to around 20 feet. It does show the wood ceiling of the CLT. And it's also starting to indicate the wood columns and beams, the beam structure. So this next view actually looks pretty similar in many ways. What we're proposing here, you can see the height of where the administrative office areas actually drops down. And it's kind of interesting because one of the, in a way, the benefit of that is you also have the visual connection towards the east and the sky. So in a way, you're going to get more daylight coming into the entry. It creates maybe perhaps a nicer kind of pedestrian scale at the entry. You still have the grandness of the higher canopy volume. And you can see the steel columns and beams are indicated in a lighter gray. And what we're proposing is that there would be a wood finish ceiling inside of the library and the reading room. And that wood ceiling would extend out to create the covered porch. So you still read the warmth of the wood. The edge of that ceiling, as you go to the west, on the west side of the beam that separates the curtain wall or the glass wall, that ceiling would be the exposed metal deck. That's the gray color between the screen. There you go. That is the metal deck. So you're just seeing a very minimal amount of that material. That is really the only change for the entry from where we were before. Some ways it could be viewed as an enhancement. And then this is the west elevation. Again, the sunscreen element that came down and formed a trellis. The extent of the sunscreen on the upper level of along the west facade is very similar, and we'll show you that right now. So this is, pretty much from the same perspective, just slightly different. But what happens here is we're really depending on the landscape planting in front of the library, reading room, and the teen area to create a level of privacy. And we actually feel very comfortable that with the landscape selection of material, it can start to grow up and create kind of a filtered view into the reading room. And from the reading room, and the teen area, a view into the landscape. So we actually think with the landscape treatment, we may not be really losing very much in terms of the idea of a privacy screen. And then you can see the upper zone of the sunscreen comes down. We're looking at a material, a perforated metal that can actually be laser cut into a number of different patterns. We'll show you what that might mean in a moment. You'll maybe go back, please. And so the other thought here is to integrate even signage into the sunscreen element. So the idea of Gladstone Library, you know, really announcing the library could be something that is kind of comfortably integrated into the screening element as a backdrop, especially with the kind of nature of it being a metal material. And then to have that signage facing Portland, which is the primary street of Gladstone, and to announce that as something a little bit different than what happens on the Dartmouth side. And then these are just some images of what you can do with perforated metal. And we've heard from the committee, you know, feedback even, you know, when we were looking at options with the Kebony and, you know, these joining elements that we refer to as bird slides. And could we organize those in a way where it could create kind of allude to a foliage pattern or something that might more directly relate to the powwow tree, which is such an important symbol for city symbol for Gladstone. And so there's ways to, as you can see in these two examples, of starting to allude to, you know, a tree-like canopy pattern that might have a much more natural and more direct reading of that reference to the powwow tree. And then there's the kind of view during the daytime and how that can change at night where it becomes this kind of glowing pattern. So this is just intended to suggest the possibility of what we can do here. What it is exactly, that's to be developed. And so we'll certainly be looking at other ideas and variations with you. And we certainly want your feedback on that. And then this is the, this is an example of a painted cement board panel, and it can come in different widths and dimensions. This is actually used on a project we did in Bend, Oregon. It's called the Pavilion. It's an ice skating pavilion. It's really kind of a civic icon in the city, and it doesn't feel as, you know, when you typically think of as cement board. A lot of it has to do with color selection and the modulation of the material. So this is what we're proposing. Many times to a more cost-effective approach is to actually have exposed fasteners as indicated here. The material can also be attached with blind fasteners behind the material, so it's more flat and you don't see those little buttons on the material. So, but those are things that we can look at, and they have different cost numbers to them. So that's the type of thing. We'll run numbers with the contractor and with ACC, our cost estimator, to understand what the cost impact is of blind connection, concealed fasteners versus exposed fasteners. And then we'll just end on the southeast corner. This is where we were, the kind of announcing of the meeting room. And, you know, there was also some concerns brought up about, you know, privacy and how much glass, how tall, how are you going to screen it? You know, certainly the, what Sina indicated, these 10-foot return walls are actually a way to reduce glass. And we're kind of really in a position where we need to do that because of it being a party line wall, a property line that runs in that east-west direction, or excuse me, north-south direction. We need to have a 10-foot return wall before you can have glazing. So that's a way to also reduce some of the glass that maybe we don't need. And then here's the view currently where we're still creating a covered entry In some ways, it's interesting because the prior view suggested a kind of a level of prominence to this meeting room entry that was kind of similar to the main entry. And so the main entry certainly is the most important to be pronounced. So there's kind of a hierarchy here. What is the main door versus, you know, a community entry, but at a kind of a more intimate scale that might, in some ways, feel more appropriate next to the scale of the adjoining apartment buildings and residences that go up Dartmouth. The other thing we're showing here is perhaps the idea of kind of taking the interior feeling of the white walls and extending those out, not unlike the white entry vestibule. That can be an opportunity for signage. It can also be an opportunity for information board. Could be a platform for art. So this is just showing this as kind of almost like a white canvas that has a lot of opportunity to be developed. What the white material does, though, is it visually gives a more expanded sense of entry domain rather than being the cement board panel. And that's kind of where we are on the exterior. We could open it up for questions or continue to go through the interior so you have the full picture and then come back with questions.
I would like to address the outside if I could.
Yes, please.
So it was on like one of the first screens where we changed the front side
Okay,
that I was concerned, that one.
that one.
Now, is that gonna, because right now I don't like it at all. It looks like a plain white billboard that's just
Right.
sitting there.
right.
Now, is this where we could have that metal sculpture, pattern, something
Exactly.
visually? Okay, because I'm
Yeah.
looking at that going, yeah, I don't
No,
get
and
behind that.
we just aren't there yet, but
Okay,
Christy, the idea is whatever that pattern is, and it could be a lot of things.
right.
That's on that elevation as well as the west elevation.
All right, I wanted to make sure that
No,
that's what we were
good.
talking about, because I
Yeah.
think that's a perfect opportunity to get texture and art rather than just a big in-your-face Gladstone library.
Right.
Because I think we want to try to improve the aesthetics as much as we can since we are cutting back. So the
Yeah.
visual interest would really be key, I think, on this.
Yeah, along those lines too, when we did our initial cost estimating, the perforated metal by itself is less cost than the Kebony, but if we go to the more custom laser cut pattern, it's equal to the Kebony cost. And so we've reduced the cost of the exterior screen by over 50%. And we're budgeting right now that it wouldn't look like just perforated metal. It would be a custom pattern to be determined.
All right, thank you, because I had a big red flag there on that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that.
Let's go to Lisa and then Lanny.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. My question was almost the same, Jim, and you kind of answered it. I am concerned that metal often looks really cold. And since we've taken away a lot of the wood, and it gets dreary in the winter, I think if we have a really nice design, it will really enhance the aesthetics of the building. So I just wanted to make that comment about the screening. And as far as the white wall that you were talking about, did that used to, on the back side? Yeah. Did that one used to have wood at one point?
No, it didn't.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder, I guess if we put wood there, that would be the only place it had wood. Is that
On the
right?
exterior,
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's, but but hearing is, are there ways to bring warmth? I mean, honestly, even the screen itself, that's an opportunity for color, or, you know, there's different, and even on this wall, opportunities for graphics and color and so forth. So yeah.
I think we can find a really beautiful design that might make it really unique. I'm
Yeah,
excited about that.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
Go to Lanny and then Nancy.
Well, as you know, I've been a little critical of the sunshade in the past. Jim, I like this so much better.
Oh, good.
Yay. You know, we need to get a good design on it, but I
Yeah.
like that we can be creative with it. And it's not just slats of wood. I'm very pleased. And I really like what you've come up with. I think this will be a big improvement, but we'll need to think about the design, but I'm happy. You didn't never thought you'd hear me
Yay.
say that, did you, Jim?
Well, we knew we would get there because that's really important, you know.
Right. Yeah, and then
that
I have
we
one
all-
other,
Yeah.
comment. You mentioned carpeting on the inside of the building. I just have a personal preference, prejudice, I guess, about carpeting in public spaces. It can get disgustingly dirty.
Right.
In a very short time. I taught school for many years, and the last school I was in had carpeting in it. The first couple of years, it was wonderful. We loved it. And then it just got disgusting. And no
Yeah.
matter how they cleaned it, it was disgusting. And I much prefer hard surfaces. I know they're not cuddly and warm,
Yeah.
but they're cleaner.
Well, you know, what's nice about this approach, you can have it all hard surface if you want, but
Yeah.
but if there is a desire to put, for instance, we're going to show drawings that show carpet right next to the windows, next to the courtyard,
Right.
because that's a seating area,
Mhm.
and that might feel really nice. With the radiant supply system, that's the preferable area for a hard surface, you know, right? So
Yeah.
what this does is allow us to have the opportunity to put the carpet wherever we want.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
I'm-
yeah,
And I know in residential carpeting, you can get the carpeting squares where if one area becomes totally disgusting, like where children are playing or adults have spilled their
Right.
coffee and you can't, you know, you can replace parts of it. And I don't know if that's feasible in a public space or not, but I just do have that prejudice just
Yeah.
because of cleanliness, not because of, and I know it would help with the sound factor, but I just have this real prejudice against it for cleanliness reasons.
yeah,
but
I
I-
tend to use carpet squares more
Yeah.
than, you know, a sheet rolled out carpet, but yeah, all
And
good
I think
points.
I think that's doable. And I have a question about the inside, but I'm going to wait until you get to till
Okay.
you go over that. So we'll wait on
right.
that one. But I'm very pleased with the metal on the outside. I think that has a lot of possibilities, art wise and aesthetically. I think it'll be pleasing. I hope.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're on the right path now. Thank you.
Okay.
Nancy, go ahead.
Hi, Jim. I'm really heartened to see this new iteration. The metal was where my head was going for a long time too. And it occurred to me that I don't know what the size and shape of that panel, those panels are. I had this thought about having a juried competition for students to make panels that could go up there. Clackamas Community College has put a lot of money into a new technology area up there, and Clackamas have a history of doing these kinds of projects. They had, at one point in time, they were throwing up buildings in the 80s that were all tilt-ups, and it was all cement blocks, so they looked like bunkers. And then somebody got a hold of that, and they started having the students make sculptures that could go on the outside of those bunkers. So there's a precedence for this, but if they could each design an individual panel that could go up there, we would have a lot of community input into this. And I could see it being stationary or people could swap them out from time to time. And it could really be a nice feature for the library. And I know that's something that architects hate is having to do this, a project like that. But that's where
Yeah,
I
we're working.
going.
I mean, there's a really cool example. We'll show it the next time we meet, but we just don't want to dwell too much on it. But there's a parking structure that's next to the Performing Arts Center, Beaverton. If you ever go out that way, you should take a look at it.
Yes.
It's really quite beautiful. And that was an artist, and it was, you know, there was a continuity to it and a story. And I think that's a really important element on the building. So you can go the other direction too, where it can also be, you know, it has to have continuity and storytelling, but it could be really, really interesting. And yeah, that's worth taking a look at if you're ever out that way. And we'll certainly share some pictures of it. There's a lot you can do with the metal material.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Let's go to Leslie, and then maybe we can talk interiors after that. Go ahead, Leslie.
On Oak Grove Boulevard is the new urban school, and they have a very large metal screen, and it is a rainbow of colors. So we've talked about
Yeah.
design, but
Right.
the metal screening, there is also the option of colors. I don't think that you would like for the library the color scheme that the students, who is my understanding were very active participants in the design of this, but I could see how you could have a very subtle shading, and in different lights, it might turn from one color to the next, and it could add a real dynamic subtlety to this, as well as, you know, the color would interact with the design. So if you ever have occasion to drive on Oak Grove Boulevard, the school is between River Road and McLaughlin.
Oh,
And it is, you'll see this, it's very prominent and quite attractive.
but I mean, you bring up a great point of color, and even we keep staring at this white wall, but that could be a colored wall and be kind of a part of the branding of the library, you know, and what are the colors or multiple colors. So there's a lot there to think about. Absolutely. Thanks, Leslie. We'll definitely take a look at that.
I think that's all the hands I see, but we can come back if folks have more questions. So over to you, Jim.
All right,
Okay,
I'm
well,
actually gonna take
Tina's
over
gonna take it away.
to do the interior. So let me see if I can multitask here. Perfect. And I'm going to do the same that Jim did. I'm going to show you the images sort of before and then where we are now, and we can kind of take a look and see and talk through some of the changes. So this is where we were at SD. You can see the wood columns, you can see the wood beams, you can see the CLT deck and the additional layer of a wood ceiling for acoustic purposes. You can sort of see straight back into the children's area and how the wood wall back here really draws you in. And then one thing I will point out, and you can see the difference in the next slide, is this kind of glimpse of the upper volume that you get through this clerestory window. And so when we go to the next view, you really get a very clear view back of the sky, because we now have reduced that upper volume at the meeting room, and that eliminates that, that kind of obstruction through those windows. And then the main difference really here is the structural system. So you can see we are now showing steel columns and steel beams. And the main difference, other than obviously the material and the color, is in member size. So going to steel really allowed us to kind of trim those members down to a more slender profile. So the columns are not quite as beefy and the beams are not quite as steep. And then the other thing that you'll notice here is that our structural deck is what you see up here in the gray color, is sort of up above. And then below that, we're still maintaining that lower layer of wood ceiling that provides that extra warmth but is also working to provide better acoustics in the space. And then this is the sort of the opposite view. You're now kind of standing in the children's area. You're looking west. This is where we were. Again, you see the wood structure, and then you also see what the screen looked like looking through those windows. So you see the kind of tree-shaped support truss for the screen, and then the cabiny members that made up the sunscreen. And then this is the carpeted area that Jim mentioned. And again, we now, moving away from the radiant slab, have more flexibility in what the extent of this carpeted area might look like. So when we go to the next view, again, the main change you'll notice is in the structural system, the steel columns, the steel beams. You'll also see how the language now from the interior to the exterior relates more. So you see the steel structure on the interior relating to that steel truss that supports the sunscreen. So there's a relationship between those two structural systems. And then the other thing that I'll point out here in this lower right-hand corner is a structural brace. Those are just fairly slender steel members, kind of an X brace. And we added that to help bring loads from the upper roof down as we kind of changed that massing. We had a pretty extensive conversation with structural, and this was one way, a fairly minimal way to transfer those loads all the way down. And what that really kind of made us think about is, well, what is this area then? Because it doesn't really allow us to have bookshelves here because that frame comes all the way down. And so Jim really had this idea of then opening that up towards the courtyard and really bringing the glass all the way down. Whereas before, this datum line here continued through, and you never really had the opportunities to sit right next to the glazing that allowed you to connect to the courtyard on a sort of more intimate level. And so that really allowed us to kind of rethink that area. Talking about the courtyard, here's a rendering. And again, as Jim mentioned, we are still working with Lango Hansen sort of around where this path kind of touches down, where it enters the children's area, where it enters the reading room. But one change we've made since you all have seen this last is the location of this wooden bench. And this was directly coming out of a conversation that we had with this group. The bench was previously located here, and there was some concern over it creating kind of a visual barrier from the interior. And especially now that we're able to bring the glass all the way down here, we really felt like moving the bench over into this corner helped free up this area. And it also created a nicer sort of terminus, a larger seating area for larger groups at this end of the courtyard. Other than that, a lot of the courtyard design is similar to what you've seen in the past, the mix of plants, the mix of seating options, the boulders, but then also this larger wooden bench for larger groups and seating with a back. And then this view, we're really excited to show you. I think this is a new view for most of you. This is starting to show the kind of placemaking that we imagine could take place in the children's area. We're really kind of interested in creating a more intimate and smaller environment within that larger room. So to really bring the scale down, maintain the warmth of the wood on the walls. Now, where in the reading room, it sort of exists up above. In the larger volume, not here, it exists kind of down low. It's more tactile. It's more at the scale of younger children. And then we're adding color. We're really trying to kind of create this playful sort of nook in this corner. And it really can accommodate sort of all kinds of different groups. It can work for just one individual, a small sort of family unit, and then also it works for story time where we have sort of stepped seating that opens up towards the larger area of the children's room. And then we really took into account comments regarding storage that we've heard. And so we are now here showing a storage cabinet. We're showing this as a white surface, could potentially be a writable surface. And then there could potentially be storage in this below the stepped seating as well. And I think that concludes the kind of formal presentation on the interior. So we can maybe do the same and take questions on the interior, and then we can jump back to the exterior as well. And maybe Allison, you can help me. I can't see everyone. Maybe
Yeah,
navigate
I've
that.
got you, Sina. No worries. So let's go to Lorraine, and then I know Lanny also has an interior question. Go ahead.
Great.
Okay,
Lorraine.
can you hear me? Yeah, okay, so
Yep.
I had two questions. One, when you show the interior looking out, are we able to see the metal screen, or is that too high? Because it didn't look like I could see a screen from that picture.
Yeah,
Right
you know,
here.
it's deceiving here. You will be able to perceive the screen
Okay,
through here.
gotcha.
Yes, just on the upper portion, right? So we got rid of the lower portion, but up here it will still have a presence.
Great. And then my second question was, I know Todd had talked about like thinking about the future that we are going towards electric vehicles. Would it be possible to be electric car plug-in ready as long as we're ripping up the concrete and doing all that, you know, like you have, you can have air conditioned ready in your house. Could we do some of that even if we couldn't do all of the electric in our budget? And then maybe the city could pick up the rest. Just
That's
a
definitely
consideration.
something, yeah, that we'll bring up with the city once we have our pre-application meeting before we go in for permit. I actually have a note to track that. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Lanny, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Could we go back to the floor plan that Jim showed at the very beginning of his presentation?
Yes, that is the very beginning.
I think it was the
There it
very,
is.
There it is.
okay. I don't see the foundation room on that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so go ahead, Sina.
Oh, the foundation area is located right off the main entry down in this area.
Okay, I just wondered because it's really hard to see in this. Okay, that's fine.
Yep,
That's all I
it's
wanted to
not
know.
labeled, so yeah, it's
Yeah,
right
we
down
should
here.
have the label.
Okay. All right, I just didn't want you to forget us. Thank you.
Oh, no way.
You got it.
He's not
Okay.
crazy, Lonnie.
I know. You have a lot of angry
Self-preservation,
ladies. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
all I want to know.
absolutely.
Other questions? Yeah, Margaret, go ahead. And then Margaret and Beverly.
On the children's area, can the wall be made so that the children can put up drawings or whatever?
Yeah, we can definitely look at display options for this sort of interior area and potentially even up here along this whole wall. It could be display of children's art. Sure.
Yeah, I think we're gonna want a hanging system,
Mhm.
obviously on the north wall or south wall of the reading room, and we'll carry that into the children's area. So we definitely want to provide the opportunity for hanging art.
Beverly, go ahead.
Yes, one of my questions, it's hard to tell with the ceiling being, or that the roof line being dropped down. Is there still going to be light coming into the children's area and into the meeting room from outside?
Yes. Yeah,
Well, in looking at this picture of the children's area, it looks like there's no, other than going to the courtyard, there's no exterior windows.
yeah, it's unfortunate. This view is like really focused in on that piece of cabinetry, but there's actually, it's kind of a corner window, right? You can see where on the left side, where the wood stops. If we were showing more of that, you would have 10 feet of glass.
That's going into the courtyard.
Going into the courtyard, so it's
Yeah,
both
I was pretty
windows.
sure there was window there, but what about for the meeting room, other than the window at the entrance area?
The window at the entrance area, that's about 10 feet of glass as well. And then there's an interior window. It's basically a glass wall from the children's area into the meeting room. So there you go. What looks like a
Okay.
white wall is actually, that's all glass. So it's a very,
Okay,
you're
okay.
going to
I
get
just,
kind of borrowed light and view through the meeting room out to the exterior.
Yeah.
So when you walk by from the exterior, you could have the opportunity to look all the way through, you know, to the end of the
Okay.
children's area.
and then the other question I had, where you had the big X brace for structural reasons, how many square feet of bookcase storage did we lose in
Right.
that?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say we lost anything. It's going to be, we have to relocate it. So
Okay,
that, we haven't studied that exactly, whether, you know, certain bookcases get a little extension or a little longer, but we haven't gone into that level of detail yet. But with the cross brace there, which is kind of a structural necessity, it just didn't make sense to put bookcases.
well, no,
and-
I can understand that because
Yeah.
we don't want the roof caving in.
Right, and it also has the benefit of really making a nice connection to the courtyard.
Yeah.
I think that's a real plus, but, so anyway, we have to design this. We haven't figured that out yet, but we're not gonna compromise what Mitzi and, you know, the library needs for books, so.
Good. And then another quick question about the exterior where you had that white wall
Yes,
going into the
yeah,
meeting room. I mean, that's attractive, but I can see that it would be a great target place for tagging.
yeah,
And I
Well,
mean, I hate to say that, but it's a fact of life.
right. Especially if it's a big white wall. It's like,
Yeah, I mean,
tag me, please.
you can just imagine that it would happen sooner than later.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So, yeah, though, I guess the main thing here is, you know, it may have a color on it, has signage, maybe some other material. I don't know. We just, it started off when we first rendered it being the darker material, and that didn't feel right either.
Yeah, no, I
So-
like the fact that it's white and it sets it off, but I just,
Yeah,
my practical side just said, oh my
Right.
gosh, tagging.
yeah,
And if they've already started tagging the new city hall, I mean,
well, if it was a white wall and it's paint, you know, it's easier to correct, but I
yeah,
think, I would hope that the end design isn't just a white wall, you know. that-
yeah,
I think it could be a great location even for art, honestly,
yeah,
and signage for the building, you know, like a relief sculpture, like the tree. I think
Yeah.
way back when, like the powwow tree, or, you know, so there's lots of opportunity there where it, you know, it makes it less attractive for someone to want to take it because you know, there's a level of occupying that with art or signage or something.
good.
Lorraine, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yay, thank you. I was wondering if we could talk a little about the community room, making sure that, because we've kind of moved past it quickly.
Right.
Is there any, you know, knowing that it's going to have to meet technology needs for a while, and maybe being able to design it in such a way that when that technology expires or gets outdated, it is
Yeah.
easy to replace. So if maybe you could address just
Yeah,
2 minutes
well,
on that.
overall in the library, it'll be state of the art in terms of technology. And we'll have probably for the size of room that the meeting room or community room is, it'll have a flat screen on it. It could have a roll down screen, but the size of the room doesn't necessarily require it. But when we look at the AV requirements, we'll figure out to make sure. But that size room, usually putting a large monitor on there that you can hook up to your laptop, really kind of state of the art. It would be something applied to the wall, not recessed into the wall. So as there's upgrades to monitors and technology that seems to get thinner and thinner, it's just an object on the wall. and it would be optimally placed for presentations. And you can interact with that. It's really a monitor that you can set up your laptop and work with. You know, whether there's 2 monitors or 1 to be determined, oftentimes 2 will have even tackable surfaces in there where it's really easy to display information. Certainly, I don't with, you know, there'll be technology, certainly power outlets, and even within the library, having charging stations for computers. That's something that we tend to build into our libraries now. And then there's a whole technology, I'm going outside the meeting room, but where we have, there's like 6 computer stations, all state-of-the-art technology. We're looking at a flat screen monitor, that location perhaps on one of those wing walls of the teen area for teens to interact with or for study. So we're, you know, it's integrated throughout the kind of study bar that faces out towards Portland would have technology and power built into it. You know, the wall that faces the courtyard, it's actually good that, you know, there's a solid wall there. We can have power outlets that are built into the wall. If we can build power outlets into a wall versus doing floor outlets, that's a much more cost-effective solution and better for maintenance. But if we need to build in power outlets into the floor, and there's certainly locations where that needs to happen, for instance, the welcome desk, we don't want to have cords strung across the library. So we're going to avoid that. But where we can come off of a wall, where people have their charging opportunities next to a seating area, we'll want to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
Other questions on the interior or the plan overall?
Allison, did you see in the chat, there's some questions? Okay.
Yeah, so there were a couple questions that were asked by the counselor who's here observing the meeting. And then I want to note Nancy also just noted for folks that she thinks that the courtyard needs a utility or emergency exit in the northwest corner. Wanted to flag that for folks.
Yeah, in terms of an emergency egress, we have 2 doors, so that's not required. And when we discussed it the last time, the type, and this was Kurt Lango, the landscape architect, sharing this, but the type of landscape material that would be used in there would be low maintenance. And honestly, even the perimeter of the library, one would probably work with, you know, a landscape maintenance company to take care of the exterior periodically in the courtyard. So one doesn't need to really provide for landscape maintenance material. So that's kind of where we ended up. And also the courtyard itself, if there was a egress door created towards the fire station, it honestly would start to compromise the integrity of the landscape and the placemaking. So it, you know, it's something we can revisit, but our last discussion was that it wasn't necessary and probably created more compromise than benefit. But we're open to talking about it more.
Jim?
Yeah.
Have you done any of your planning in here to meet the technology needs of senior citizens?
Well, I think that's a really great discussion. Certainly accessibility is super important, that we're going to be providing accessible access to all the technology that's provided. Certainly the computer cable. Todd, are you, please maybe elaborate, because it sounds like I might not be answering.
Well,
your question.
access is good enough for teenagers,
Sure.
but seniors are going to need, a lot more assistance, up close and personal, designated space, one-on-one time.
And so you're suggesting, is there, and that one-on-one time would be with the librarian staff. That's where probably these smaller meeting rooms are really great resource. We haven't talked about those in a while, but they're going to be outfitted with technology. You can see that dark line on the shared wall. That's indicating a monitor. So that would be an ideal location, probably the one that's the meeting room that's closest to the library kind of service point desk. That would be an ideal location for one-on-one. Other comments or, just questions?
Well, we could spend an hour or two talking about that.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
let's move on.
Okay. Well, we'll get there. That's what's going to be fun about the next phase of design. But I think that's a really great location for.
I think it is something that needs to be, thought of and planned for.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also, depending on cost, I mean, automatic door openers for accessibility and where those might be located. They're expensive, so we have to be real thoughtful. Certainly, the main entry doors would have it. One of the restroom stalls would have that as well. It's possible one of the meeting rooms, but then there's a proximity of that meeting room to the west, the small one next to the librarian staff, that might not be necessary. But those
I'm
are all
talking
good
about
questions.
anybody over 40.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How are we doing, Allison? Do you see any more questions?
I don't see any hands. I'm looking at nonverbal body language and I don't see anybody waving me down.
So should we move to public comment?
I think so. I guess a final call for questions from folks, from any task force members. Okay, then Lorraine, I'll move into public comment if cool. So if there is anybody here who'd like to give public comment this evening, we hold 10 minutes on our agenda for that. You can raise your hand digitally and I'll see how many hands we have and then divide it by the number of folks who'd like to speak. If you're calling in on your phone, you can press *9 and that will digitally raise your hand. So I'll hold a little bit of awkward silence if folks are going to look for the raising hand button. And I know that some of the folks who are out there this evening are folks like Mitzi and Ellen and Jackie. We're glad that you're here, folks. If there's anything else, anybody else who'd like to give public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so Lorraine, back to you.
Okay, so it looks like we're wrapping this up. Jason, we don't have a date for another meeting, do we? It's just to be announced?
Yeah, we're I think when we get a better idea of when we're how the CMGC process goes, then I can come out and we can start a date. I wouldn't imagine it might be another couple months, but to have an actual meeting like this. But in the meantime, I can definitely send email updates as
That'd be nice.
Certain things happen, so that at least we're communicating a little bit more. I mean, we'll communicate more now that everybody kind of knows what's going on. I don't see a problem with that. So when we get the CMGC picked, we'll let you guys know. We'll let you know any news that's pertinent to this group in the future. So, and then, like I said, maybe a couple months, 2 or 3 months, and we can meet again as we get started again on the design.
And of course, with keeping Bev in mind, as soon as you can get this project going, the better it is, right, Bev?
I agree.
All right, well, with that,
yes, I was going to make that final comment. because I've been pushing all along to start sooner, and now we're going to be starting later. We've wanted to break away from the Oak Grove Library and just get ours built like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well,
And to find out that we're pushing it out another 4 months is very disheartening.
Let's just hope that we get cheaper costs in 4 months.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
let's hope that
yes.
that's what's going to happen. So
Yes.
with that in mind, thank you, everybody. Oh, I do see. Oh,
And there's
There's
one.
the
I
other-
had
Go
I had
ahead.
a really quick question, and excuse me if I have forgotten, but did we ever hear from the arts committee about what they talked about?
Good point.
I don't think we have had a meeting since they met.
No, I don't think we have not. I think that was like the first meeting I had with some of the task force members.
Can we maybe just get a quick overview in the next couple minutes, or save that for the next meeting?
I off the top of my head, I honestly can't remember a lot of what we talked in that meeting, so I don't think I could give a very good update right now. We could, I mean, maybe, I don't know if an email, if I could summarize in an email, I can go back and look.
I think there was some, as I recall, but I may not get this all right, so some of the folks who are part of that committee could chime in, but there was discussion about thinking of this sunscreen element as being a way to perhaps integrate an artist into it. You know, there is a limited budget, so you can stretch it. You could stretch it very thin, but finding out, you know, the changing gallery opportunities. There was discussion about more permanent art installation, perhaps in the children's area, also the teen zone. And then we talked about where changing art could be in the meeting room, as well as the south wall of the reading room. So
Jason, does the art committee have a meeting date, another meeting date set up?
Not yet. I was trying to figure out how to tie it in. I don't want to get, you know, the art committee too far in front of the design.
Yeah.
But if we feel, once we feel like we know kind of if we're going to move in this direction, then we'll get that started up soon too. So, and we're just trying to, I am looking around to see where we can get some help with our budget too, see what we can do with that. So
I don't know if there's any art grants or anything that we can look into, or, you know, how to even go about that. I don't have that experience, but
where there's I think it's called the Clackamas Arts Alliance or something. So I'm trying to get in touch with somebody there to see also if they have some resources or know how to best go about that. So I am trying to take some of this time that we've got right now while we're waiting to start up the art selection, that whole process. I want to try to get that nailed down so that when we are ready, we kind of have everybody we need to get going on that.
thank you.
With that, I forgot that Todd had brought up an idea that maybe if there was space, there could be like a first Thursday where the community room would be open and their artists' work could be displayed, and it would be great for the community and the businesses, and it could be like the library was open a little later or something. So that was something that came from Todd.
I like it.
Yeah.
that's a nice idea. Yeah.
So that would help us with our budget.
Yeah, no, it seems like it'd be fairly easy to implement.
So Jason, did anybody address the question that the counselor asked in the chat about getting relief funds and considering those funds?
I'll just have to look into that. I am not aware of any and what we could possibly, if there are relief funds, what we could use that for. But I know there's been talk a little bit about using some ARPA funding for like broadband and internet and technology in the library. But I'll see if there's anything else. I'm just not aware of it right now, but it doesn't mean there isn't.
And is
So
that,
maybe, sorry, that maybe the counselor could provide some detail about that relief. You could reach out to him
Yeah.
or her.
and I wonder if that relief funding, if that's what they're talking about with the money that was given by Mark Meek, because that came from the American, what did it come from? The American,
Yeah, the American Rescue.
are those the same funds? Is that what they're talking about? So I don't know.
It's tied to that. I don't want to butcher it, but
Yeah.
I know it's related to that. And it's from the state, but I think they got something from federal to help with
Awesome.
that, and it freed up some other money. So is my understanding. But yeah, I can definitely look into that and see if we're always open to looking for anything we can get to help us. Every dollar is going to help for this project.
Excellent. Okay, a lot of discussion there at the end. Anything else for the good of the order? I'm looking. Do I see anybody? Allison doesn't see anybody. Okay, so I guess we will be hearing from Jason in email and look forward to seeing you guys maybe October, November, right, Jason?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.